Welcome to Conversations with the Masters. Whether you're a financial advisor, an insurance advisor, a business advisor, as a matter of fact, if you're a consultant, you're an advisor, knowing how to acquire a clients and the right clients is a key to success. With that said, our master today is Bill Bachrach, and he's going to teach us how to master client acquisition. Bill is a master at teaching financial advisors how to create their ideal life by building their ideal business with ideal clients. And a key element, of course, is mastering client acquisition. The principles Bill teaches are great for any advisor or consultant in any industry who wants to dramatically elevate their client value and grow their business. Bill is a member of the Financial Planning Magazine's Hall of Fame and the Professional Speakers Hall of Fame, and is the author of 5 industry-selling books that are amazing. He sold millions of copies, including Value-Based Selling and High Trust Leadership. And he's the creator of a highly successful online learning system, Your Advisor Roadmap, which has thousands of subscribers. So let's get you in here, Bill. All right, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's a pleasure. It's always good to see your smiling face, and I'm honored to be considered one of the masters. So I'll try to live up to that standard.
Well, you surely are, and you've been doing this for a long time, and I've been following you for many decades. So, with that said, what we want to do is make sure people understand how to, really acquire the best possible clients. But to do that, in my introduction, I set it up with an interesting little thing that I got off of your website, which I want to dig into. And that is creating your ideal life by creating your ideal business with ideal clients. And by the way, I love the word ideal. So let's just talk a little bit about what do you mean by ideal life here? Let's get into those 3 elements to tee up our client acquisition.
Sure. I mean, it's such an important idea to think about how do your business choices and your life choices align with creating the life that you really want, right? So we all have friends who are very good at making bad decisions. And of course, if you're a parent, you're concerned about who your kids hang out with and who they're influenced by and whether they're making bad choices or good choices. But there's a big difference between making choices that are good or bad and really making choices that have a higher probability of creating the ideal. And it's certainly not an uncommon principle or fundamental of success or professional development that the more clear your target is, the higher the probability is that you're going to achieve it. So as long as you're going to create a target, why not make it ideal? So there's a lot of in high performance writing and research, in neuroscience, the idea of setting a very big goal. It's better to have a big goal and fall a little short than having a lesser goal and achieving it. So this idea that goals are supposed to be realistic, I think is absurd. I don't think goals should be realistic at all. I think you would be better off setting a big goal and falling a little short. If you're an Olympian, you'd rather set a goal to have a world record and win the gold medal. And maybe if it falls short, you end up with the silver or the bronze. But why would you set a goal if you're an Olympian to win the bronze medal or to just be in the top 10? So creating a vision for your ideal life it's beyond this idea of figuring out your personal why. So there are 6 ideal life questions. I know the people watching this can pause and record and write them down. And the 6 ideal life questions. Number 1, what does your ideal life look like? Right. So we speak in words, but we think in pictures. So when you think about your ideal life, what are the pictures? What does your ideal life actually look like? Number 2, what does it sound like? Now that may sound a little odd because we don't always, well, what does my ideal life sound like? Well, it could be the sound of your children laughing. It could be the sound of, I know you're on the lake for the summer and you're in San Diego for the winter. So there are probably lake sounds. And then there are probably San Diego, more sort of beach and sailing on the ocean sounds are different than using all your great toys on the lake in Wisconsin. So what does it sound like? If you're an avid golfer, it might be the sound of the golf club striking the ball at the sweet spot. There are a lot of sounds. The third question is, what does it feel like? When you're living your ideal life, what does it feel like? And if you're saying to yourself, but I'm not living my ideal life, so I don't know what it feels like, well, use your imagination, right? So if you can imagine your ideal life, what does it feel like? So first three questions: what does it look like, sound like, and feel like? Fourth question is, what are you doing? When you're living your ideal life, what are you doing? So this is an ideal life moment for me. So part of my ideal life is making a difference and helping people, and especially having conversations with people I respect. My ideal life mantra is to do interesting things with interesting people. And you and your wife, Sharon, are two of those people. So this is something that I'm doing when I'm living my ideal life. What are you doing when you're living your ideal life? Question number 5 is, who are you with? I mean, there are definitely some ideal life people, and that might lead to another list of who are you not with. So there are some things you may not have a choice about, some people you may not have a choice about, but for the most part, we have a choice of the people we're with. And some people would support your ideal life, and some people would rather prevent you from having your ideal life. So that might be an easy decision. And then the last question is, who are you being? And that's a little woo-woo, a little spiritual, but who are you being? It could be as simple as being happy. It could be as simple as being fulfilled. It could be being charitable or philanthropic. Repetition is the key to learning. So perhaps if this idea appeals to you, you'll want to write those down and you could take hours doing this. I know people who make this the family retreat. And then what do you do with that? And the answer to that question is, well, compare your current life to your ideal life, and then consider what choices do you need to make to actually have your ideal life. So that's how we start with ideal life. And it's very, very powerful to make your decisions based on your ideal life.
Yeah, I really like that. Thanks for going through that, because the other little element, and now of course I'll throw the futurist in me on that, and that is your ideal life out in the future, not just in the present. Because so I would like you to, in doing what Bill had talked about, at least go 10 years out. I like to go farther than that, but at least 10 years out, and think of, so first of all, how old are you going to be in 10 years? And how is that different from what you might consider ideal today? What would ideal be 15 years from now? And what kind of work, how much time are you spending, et cetera, how much money you're making, who are you spending time with, the exact things that Bill wanted you to go through. And I love your focus on the word ideal, because if we undershoot, we will undershoot. And and the other little element that struck me when you were talking about that, which again, I really love what you just did, is we all are so much more than we have currently up till now done. We have so much more inside of each of us, more capabilities, more abilities, to not just do, but to be. So it'd be good to tap into that as part of that ideal. Well, I think we've kind of gotten into that ideal life. I like that. And I know you've been good at creating that for yourself with all the fun things that you get to do. Let's switch now to, all right, so how does that lead to the ideal business? Because I see all these things as connected. I know you do too. So now that I've got my ideal life defined, um, how do I create an ideal business? Because, by the way, if you don't have an ideal business, you will not have an ideal life. So what is that idea? How do you make that work?
It's I won't say it's easy, but it's also relatively simple. So now that you're clear about what your ideal life is, and I started doing this with business people, that's mostly who I do it with. But I also do this every summer. I speak at Pepperdine University, has their youth citizenship seminar, and about 250 to 300 17-year-old kids. Well, they might not exactly be 17. They're 16, 17, 18. They're between their junior and senior year of high school. And this is a 1-week program. And I am typically the kickoff speaker on Monday morning. And I facilitate this exercise where I not only share with them the questions, but they have time to write the answers down. And so, regardless of whether you're sort of beginning your career, you're in the middle or toward the end of your career, you are simply writing down. I mean, it helps to write it down. So, what is an ideal business? right? So whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a corporate executive, whether you're somewhere in the middle, maybe you're a salesperson. I appreciate that most of your audience, they may not be financial advisors, which is my specialty, but whatever it is that you are, whether it's corporate or entrepreneur, high level, middle level, low level, there's something that you believe would be ideal. And if you're not sure what ideal is, what would make it better? So as you're to your point about it could be 10 years out. Well, before your life becomes ideal, it becomes pretty freaking good, right? Every year that you're moving toward ideal, it's getting better and better. And chances are it has something to do with the people that you work with. It has something to do with your customers or clients or your patients or whatever you call the people who give you money. It has something to do with them. So to your point, you can't have your ideal life without having your ideal business. I think you're saying that because it presumes there's some funding required to have your ideal life, right? There's some funding that you need to pay for your present ideal lifestyle. You want to save and invest enough so at some point you don't have to work if you don't want to work, and you could still have your ideal life. So what does your ideal business look like? What are you doing in your ideal business? Who are you serving? The saying that I have for financial advisors is most financial advisors work too many hours for too little money, trying to serve too many of the wrong clients. And that's
Really
almost
good statement you just made. I love that. Say that again.
most financial advisors. And I know this carries over to a lot of
Oh,
businesses,
yeah. That's why I want you to say it again.
right? They're working too many hours for too little money, trying to serve too many of the wrong clients. So now that ideal business ties into ideal clients, right? So if you really have an ideal business rather, you have to have ideal clients. So what does an ideal business look like? What's an ideal client look like? And then you start thinking of how many of that do I need? And you can tell some of this is just thinking a little bigger, thinking a little better,
Yeah.
sort of suppressing some of your limiting beliefs of, but my company says I have to work with all of these people. Well, I think your company really expects you to bring in some amount of money,
Right.
right? And well, but I can't bring it all in from one client. Well, maybe it's not one. What if it was two? Does it have to be 183? So it's rethinking the arithmetic. So rethinking if you're a leader, it's rethinking. Gee, because it's easy to get frustrated, right? I mean, so you work so hard to recruit, hire, train, and develop people, right? So what is the ideal person for that position? And what would you have to pay the ideal person? What would you have to offer the ideal person? And how much would it be worth if you actually had the ideal person, or certainly much closer to it? So it's a mindset, but it's also an executable tactic.
Yeah. In hiring, maybe you have the ideal person for acquiring the wrong customer, right? Hey, so hey, this is like, whoa, blinding flash of the future obvious. So I think the key is you got to look at who you're working with, who your support team, who is it, and if you're a company and you're working for that company, which most of us probably are, what look at those and then look to again the ideal customer and really help to define that. There's always a better customer. There's always a better cut. And by the way, there's always a bigger fish. You think you got a big fish now? Maybe it's a small fish. Maybe you didn't realize you need a different pond. I mean, it's right. It's all very
And
interesting.
they're often closer than you think. What I find interesting is when I do projects with, and again, I specialize in the financial services industry. So, but a segment of the financial services industry, they're called wholesalers. And
Mhm.
they're typically the representatives of the products, mutual funds, annuity companies, insurance companies, and they have a sales force of anywhere from 5 to 100, depending on the size of the organization. And they typically have a geographic territory, and then they have a budget. They have a budget for travel and hotel and entertainment. And I was doing a project like this with a group that was based in New York City a few years ago, and I took one example. I took Brian, who happened to cover Boston, Hartford, Connecticut, and a few other major cities were part of his territory. And we worked out in a very short period of time, he lives in Boston, that he could achieve the revenue goal that his company has from him in one building in the Back Bay of Boston. And we went through, it happened to be the John Hancock building. And I said, so just name a building, because he's thinking I have to cover my territory. And his national sales manager is named David. David's sitting in the front row. And I said, so does Brian need to cover the territory, or does Brian need to deliver the revenue?
Yeah, very simple.
Right? And David said, deliver the revenue. I said, so Brian's territory is bigger. It's all of Boston and Hartford and a couple of other cities that he named. But if he never left this one building and brought in the revenue, would you fire Brian? And he laughed. He said, of course not. And then the question was, but how would Hartford get covered? Well, we'd hire somebody else to cover Hartford. And then in that case, Brian had a $75,000 travel budget, right? So I said, well, Brian, how do you feel about, he's got kids, he's got a wife. How do you feel about being on the road as much as you're on the road? And so when you think about your ideal business and actually hitting a bigger number, he actually concluded he could hit a bigger number because by focusing on one building, instead of, because when he travels, when he's in his car, on a train or an airplane to go to another city, he's not delivering any value to his prospects or clients, right? But so converting travel time into face-to-face time with prospects and clients, that would generate more revenue. And then, of course, who could he compete with? So if he's the only wholesaler, in this case, it was of a mutual fund company, there are 50 mutual fund companies that are prospecting the financial advisors in this building, but none of them are showing up in that building every day because they're spreading their time around. And so Brian adopted that philosophy. He took his $75,000 budget, and with some legal and regulatory limitations, instead of spending his budget on airline tickets and hotels, he spent his budget on helping the financial advisors in his territory be more successful. Because again, the financial advisors don't get any benefit from money he spends on an airline ticket. But he could spend that money on things that would help financial advisors acquire clients, be more successful, manage their time better. Again, there are legal limitations. He couldn't just give them $5,000 or, take them to a really fancy sporting events. There's some legal limits around those things, but you get the idea. If you would focus smaller on a smaller number who can deliver more, you'll actually generate more business. But most people think and try, I got to cover the territory, and they spread themselves too thin. I'm thinking of your great philosophy of skip it, right?
Yeah, the skip it principle.
Maybe instead of trying to cover a big territory to generate the number, it's how little could you do to generate that number. And by skipping some things and focusing on the most important, the simplest, how can you make it bigger? How can you make it simpler? What can you skip? So instead you use the time to generate your revenue. And then Brian was also able to work a little less because he didn't just hit his target, he exceeded his target, and he was able to convert some of the business time into personal time, improving his quality of life. And the fact that his sales manager let him do that created a bond of trust between him and his sales manager. Because I've done that same exercise where the sales manager says, you got to do both, right? You got to cover the territory and you have to hit the target. And they were not willing to do what David said, which is, hey, I don't know, if you can hit your target with one client, fine.
Yeah, exactly. First of all, for all of you that are watching right now you see the brilliance of Bill and why I brought him in here. Because, he changes how you think about things in such a beautiful way. For example, we can give you a big territory and you think, wow, that's the opportunity. Well, maybe that's not the opportunity. Maybe the opportunity is focus. Just a little quick thing you reminded me of. When I was a little kid, I remember being outside, playing outside, and I looked at the blades of grass, and, the sun on the blades of grass helped the grass to grow. However, when I took out my trusty little magnifying glass and focused the sun on the blades of grass, I could burst them into flames. In other words, the power of focus is so powerful. And so what are you focusing on? And again, abundance, another principle I'll just share, and I don't know if you've heard this one yet, Bill, but abundance brings scarcity and scarcity brings abundance. And what I mean by that principle is if you can do anything, you can't think of what to do. So if you can do, if you have an abundant, I got all of this giant territory and all the people in that territory, whoa, it's so much. So, but when you have it focused down, scarcity, all of a sudden you can think of abundant things to do within that building or within a smaller. So I think you just gave an excellent example of that principle as well.
And I think it carries over. I'm very conscious that while I specialize in financial services, there are a lot of business development people who are responsible for client acquisition who have territories. They have people spread out all over, and they might just be right under your nose. So have you done some kind of a demographic exercise to truly identify how many people are close? So within a mile radius, within 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, because I said it earlier, but I'll say it again, you traveling doesn't generate value for your existing customers or your prospects. I'm an avid cyclist, and I was riding my bike about 2 months ago with a woman who is a former professional cyclist. I mean, she's truly a high achiever in that. And she recently got a new job at Wells Fargo, and she specializes in the private client group. She works in North San Diego County, and their target, they're people who have $10 million. So she's looking for, and I don't know if that was $10 million of investable money or if it was $10 million net worth. I didn't drill down. But the next question I asked her is, I said, well, how many people are there within some radius of you who have $10 million and who meet that criteria? And she looked at me and she said, I don't know. And I said, you got to know. Right. So if you only work with people who meet some $10 million threshold, you got to know how many there are and where they are, because she works in a branch office. So she's just covering a reasonable geography. Right. So I don't know exactly what the geography is of that branch office, but it's probably no more than about 15 miles. And where she is in North San Diego County, you've got Del Mar and Solana Beach and Rancho Santa Fe and Fairbanks Ranch, and there are plenty of people out there. And I said, well, does somebody in your company know? And she said, I don't think so. And I said, well, whatever you have to do, working with your leaders, your managers, your supervisor, you just doing it on your own, you got to know how many there are. And I would suggest you want to be able to figure out and literally have a list by name. And then let's also cover a little bit. An ideal client isn't just money, it's also personality. Right? So some people are difficult. And that's one of you can't have your ideal life, no matter how much money you make, if you feel like a subservient business person who has to kiss the butts of people just to keep them as clients. Some people are unreasonable. Some people are incapable of trusting. Some people have expectations that don't really match what is realistic for you to do for them or what you want to do for them. All right. So I don't agree that the customer is always right. All right. I agree with our friend Shep Hyken that the customer isn't always right, but they are always the customer. So if you choose to do business with people who sort of insist on being right, there are people who say, well, I don't have to show up on time for meetings because I'm the customer. Right. So I don't have to behave in a reasonably sort of socially acceptable way, and you have to deal with it because I pay you. There are plenty of nice people who show up for their meetings on time, who show up prepared, who don't haggle over every nickel of the price, who are grateful for the service that you provide, who are happy to refer. So you're building an ideal client profile. Part of it is they generate some proportion of the money you need to make. And the other part of it is you actually enjoy working with them. And what I teach financial advisors is just look at your appointment calendar, or I know you work internationally, so your appointment diary. So look and just see who's coming in today or tomorrow or the next day. And what's your visceral reaction when you see their name, right? So like I knew when I was showing up here today that I was going to see Dan Burrus, and that made me smile. right? So do people look in their appointment diary and they go, oh crap, the Heffelfingers are coming in, and oh, this is going to be a pain in the butt, right? They're going to be unhappy. They're going to ask a bunch of irrelevant questions. If I don't have every answer at my fingertips, God forbid I should say I don't know, they're going to roast me for that. They're going to be pressing for some kind of a price concession. So, I mean, you know who you don't like working with, you know who you do like working with. So look at the people you do like working with and just make a list of their personality characteristics, and now make it a conscious decision to go find those people. Don't just accept who you can get easily. Consciously go find the people you really want.
Yeah, something I've discovered over the decades in business is that if they seem like they're a hassle in the beginning, they'll be a hassle the whole way.
It
And
doesn't get easier.
you can tell right off the bat. So it's better to just say no to them. Don't acquire them in the first place, because life is short. As you said, life is short. And if they're weird in the beginning, they'll be weird the whole way, probably even getting weirder. So anyway, so that
It
was,
doesn't improve. Well, the word that I use, I just use fit, right? So this isn't about, that's why I talk about being a trusted advisor, not a salesperson. We're
yeah.
not talking about features and benefits presentations, handling objections, and closing. We're talking about taking people through a process. I view it as a series of exercises where you ask really good questions, and then how they answer the questions, the actual answers to the questions. You're not trying to convince or persuade people. You're looking for a good fit. And if there is a legitimate good fit, if by consuming them buying your product or service, it will truly help them achieve a goal or fulfill their values, it'll do something positive for them. I think we should all assume that people are smart enough to recognize whether or not what you have to offer is good for them. It's not our job to convince or persuade them. It's to help them discover that there's a good fit. And if there's not a good fit, you shouldn't invite somebody to be a client where there isn't a good fit. And to your point, it could be that they can afford it, and financially it might work. But again, you're making a decision. It's not quite like a marriage. I call it like a business marriage, right? So you're going to have regular meetings with this person or these people. And you're absolutely right. If it's already difficult in the initial meeting, it not only doesn't get better, but I agree with you that it gets worse. And so people say to me all the time, but Bill, but I have to take those people because I need the money. And I said, well, here's the trade-off. While you are dealing with this difficult client, serving them, you now don't have the time to go find a better or an ideal client. So now you get stuck in this cycle and you end up in the mediocre middle forever. So most, again, from my world, people are working too many hours for too little money for too many of the wrong clients. They're now stuck trying to serve too many of the wrong clients.
And by the way,
And
their ideal life has just took a nosedive.
because you're working, you can't say, well, I have my ideal life outside of work.
Yeah.
So I mean, I appreciate the fact that not, I don't agree with the idea that, you have to do what you love with your work. I think you can find things that you love about your work. And unfortunately, there will always be things that are difficult, right? So I think it's got to be enormously wonderful to be a professional athlete, but I don't think any of them like the ice bath.
Yeah.
So I was watching that show on Netflix, Quarterbacks, and it showed Kirk Cousins said, I got to reduce inflammation. And it showed him stepping into the ice bath. And he did not look happy as he was stepping into the ice bath. So there's, no matter how much you overall like what you do, there are some elements, and many of them are related to client acquisition, that you probably don't like. So by all means, you have to do some things that you may not like to do, but you shouldn't force yourself to work with difficult people permanently over time. And then the more ideal clients you have, the more you can start to let go of the non-ideal clients, even if they're profitable. Maybe somebody else at your company will deal with them. Maybe your company will let them go. I'm on a national board and we're a membership organization, and we actually have a kind of a line item veto that there are some members who are so difficult and so negative that we're happy to see them not renew. So when they ask, well, why should I renew my membership? We're like, you probably shouldn't.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
It's okay to do that.
Right, right, right. Well, there's many fish in the sea, got to be catching the right ones.
And
Very good.
that's your abundance mentality. When you do
Exactly.
that demographic research within a relatively narrow geography, it's amazing how many ideal prospects who could be ideal clients there are more than you would ever actually need. Almost certainly, there could be an exception to that, but I haven't seen it yet. Even outside the financial services industry, I haven't seen it when you actually do the exercise. For example, there are 14 million millionaires in the United States, and 13.3 million of them, 95%, have less than $10 million. So the sweet spot for most financial advisors is 1 to 10 million. That would fit their ideal client profile. And if you divide that by the number of financial advisors in the United States, it works out to 50.56 millionaires per financial advisor. And most financial advisors don't have 50 millionaires as clients because they don't even know that. They're surprised. I find it interesting that I probably shouldn't know more about how many ideal prospects there are than you are. I know that for the United States, and it's similar for other countries as well. So you want to know it for where you are. What is your actual geography and how close can you go? But they're so busy serving the wrong people, they don't even have time to get their fair share of the right people.
Well, you've mentioned a couple of times something that's really, I think, important, and that is answers can be found in the data if you know the right kind of data to be looking for. And obviously, what you're doing and teaching, most are not doing, and that is, oh, I didn't even know that data existed. I didn't even know you could find out those kind of things. I had no idea. But yet it's there. And what are some good tools that people could use? Like, for example, if I was a financial advisor and I was looking for clients that were like you're in La Jolla, 10 million and above, there are resources that you can use to find that data, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, you and I are old enough to remember a world without an internet.
Yeah.
So I mean, in the old days, you got this information by buying directories. So there are business directories, there are B2B directories, there are consumer directories. I was a young financial advisor. I started in this business in the mid 1980s when I was in my mid 20s. And I don't come from a wealthy family. I grew up on military bases, and I actually dropped out of college to move to San Diego because, well, it's San Diego. It's surf, sunshine, fun. And then I realized fairly quickly, as one day I was in the surf at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was looking around and I was looking. You'll know this because you live in San Diego, but just for everybody's perspective, there's Mission Beach where I lived, which is a lower end beach community. Mission Beach, Pacific Beach, then La Jolla, and La Jolla goes up the hill to Mount Soledad. And I was in the surf at Mission Beach at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was looking up at La Jolla. And my crappy little apartment in Mission Beach was kind of across the street from where I'd paddled out to surf. And I thought, I wonder who lives up there. How do you get to live up there? I mean, I know it's more expensive. How do you get there? And then I looked around. I said, I'm pretty sure nobody who can afford to live up there is out here in the surf at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. And I just started thinking about that. So I did very rudimentary research. I decided I would go to work in the financial services industry because I wanted to learn about money. And I just literally drove up and down every street in La Jolla. And I realized there are thousands and thousands of people who are wealthy enough to live in these multi-million-dollar homes. So it wasn't very technical. It wasn't a research report, but it gave me what you described. It developed my abundance mindset. And I realized at that time, I thought I just need 100 of them. In financial services world, you really only need 50. But as a younger guy in my first pass at this, I thought, if I got 100 millionaires as clients, I'll make plenty of money. I'll be set. That'd be fantastic. And so it doesn't have to be complicated. In today's day and age, you can either go to the internet, somebody else has already done this research, or you could go to a university If it didn't exist, I would go to a university marketing or business department and say, and ask the question. So here's what I need to know. Can we get a group of people together, interns, students, and how much would I have to pay? And it's usually hundreds of dollars and not thousands of dollars. They would say, oh, this is a really interesting project. And a bunch of really smart university students can get you the answer to just about any question you would have if the internet wouldn't. And then you could probably, Dan, speak to how would you use Chat GPT now?
Exactly.
To get that answer. And I'm not as smart or sophisticated as you with that kind of a tool, but I'm sure you could go to Chat GPT or one of the other AI engines that you're expert at and ask it these questions. And I don't know, 30 seconds later, a minute later.
Yeah, exactly. You got an answer. And when you have a question about anything, as long as you brought it up, a good place to start is with a Chat GPT or one of the other generative AI tools that are out there and of course, now we have enterprise versions of Chat GPT and OpenAI, got enterprise versions from Microsoft and from Google with security wrappers around it. So, there's no reason to not check all of that out. But again, that's a source. It's not the source. I want to, of course, look somewhere else. But the point here is there's abundance out there. And are we thinking too small? Generally, most of us are. I always like to think of it as there's a bigger big. You have to see the big first, really define the big for yourself, and then realize, well, that's way too small. So up that game, or you won't have your ideal life with ideal clients and ideal business, and go for it. We're getting close to the end. Let me just ask you, wait, before we go any further, holy cow, I want to give people how to get in touch with you. Let's put up your website, and there are we've got it right down there. There's amazing resources there. I want you to visit that. Also, your advisor roadmap is amazingly powerful. There is a link to advisor roadmap. If you are a financial advisor, you got to go there. Absolutely, guaranteed. And secondly, and I don't know if I would have to ask you to see if you agree, but my guess is if you're an advisor, period, you could probably find a wealth of great knowledge from the advisor roadmap. You wouldn't have to be a financial advisor. Again, could be insurance, it could be a business advisor or any others. What's your thought on that? Yeah, because my thinking is that being a financial advisor, again, their principles are universal.
Yeah, that's true. Our advisor, youradvisorroadmap.com, I've taken everything that we know about acquiring ideal clients, serving ideal clients. There's a whole section on mastering your mindset. There's a section on leadership. So I would agree with you that probably anybody in business who's responsible for client acquisition, especially, would benefit from that. That being said, it really is so focused for financial advisors that I could make that leap, but I wouldn't sort of with confidence say that if you're not in the financial services industry. So I'm happy to have our conversation and talk about how it goes beyond that. But it really is so designed for financial advisors.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll let that be up to the viewer. You're certainly welcome to call and talk to somebody on our team, but that's really our specialty. So I get these principles apply. But what we've done is we've applied these principles with very specific methods, specific scripts, video training, and they are all so oriented for the retail financial advisor that's who would be best equipped for that.
Well, and I thank you for that. That's great. And is there any final? Let's wind this up with any final something they should do as being an advisor of some kind right now.
Yeah,
What would
absolutely.
be a good thing that we want them to do?
Yeah, I think there are two things. And the first one I would say is, and you brought it up, we keep talking about abundance mentality. And unfortunately, whether it's through our family, our friends, our parents, teachers, well-meaning people, the media, it's so easy to be, even if we don't realize it, we're negative, we have limiting beliefs, we have fears. So there's two things I would recommend. Stop watching the news. Stop consuming the news. Don't watch it on TV. Don't follow it on social media. I mean, I am so unplugged from world events. I mean, I know there was COVID. I know there's a war in Ukraine. I don't follow the market. How can you train financial advisors and not follow the market? Because what the market is doing on a day-to-day basis isn't relevant. What the government's doing or not doing, it never changes. If you were to watch the news from 1965, it looks just like the news in 2023. I mean, it doesn't change, and it's eroding your confidence. It's affecting your mindset, whether you realize it or not. So what do you replace it with? How about inspirational stories? So biographies of inspirational people, study greatness, watch sports. I like to watch stand-up comedians. I mean, I would rather watch 30 minutes of pretty much any stand-up comedian than 30 minutes of a news anchor, pouring in the worst and most horrific things that have happened in the world. So I also recommend take some charity time, donate some money, donate some time to some cause that you can really believe in, where you can really make a difference with your time and money. But unplug from that, substitute it with something that's much more positive. I would imagine I don't know who the other people are who you've interviewed for this series, but I'll bet repeatedly watching and listening to interviews like this is much better than following the news.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And a little side note, when I turned 30, I took a year and went mountain climbing and backpacking, and I was unplugged for a year. And somehow, without me monitoring the world, it survived. So, and when I got back from that year, because there was nothing in for that entire year, it's kind of the same old stuff. So again, I think it's good wisdom. Bill, I want to really thank you for sharing your wisdom with everyone. You were fantastic, and let's remember to go to his website and go and check out. If you're a financial advisor, check out his learning system. It's amazing. Thank you so much for coming in.
Dan, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Make it a great day.